everyone, welcome to this video Alteryx hands-on questions. If you like the video, do subscribe to my channel. Now, let's get started with the introduction. We will be using the accident dataset. Below is the sample data. This dataset is from Kaggle. I'll give the link in the description box. Now, let's check out the file which we will be getting. Here we'll have the accident IDs, severity, start time, and many other columns. So for this demo, we are going to use the ID and the start time. So we'll count the IDs to count the number of accidents, and start time will create multiple columns out of this for our different questions. So let's get started with our questions. The first question is to analyze the weekday versus weekend accident. If you notice our data, we don't have anything which mentions weekday or weekend. We don't even have the day of the week, right? So we'll have to go with our start time and we have to create the columns, custom columns for it. Now let's move on to Alteryx and import our data. Let me go to the import tool and bring our input data. I select the accidents dataset. Now I'll bring in a formula tool. So first I need to create the day. Let me add a new column called as day, and we can use a datetime format. We pass in the start time for that, and since we want the day, right, we'll have to use capital A as the in the formula. And this you can check out from the date functions of Alteryx help. This is done. Let's try to run it. I need to put a browse tool to see the output. So the column is created. Next would be to create the date time column. We can use the same formula tool. Let's create date type as a new column. Here we can use the if-else statements. I'll just copy paste in order to save some time for us. So here what we are doing, if the day is in Monday to Friday, we'll make it a weekday. Else if it is a Saturday, Sunday, then it will be weekend. Else it is a data issue. Since this dataset has some data issues, we are going with this 3 steps. Otherwise, you can do in if and else itself. Let's run this. And check out our output. We got this. So let's check why the data issue is coming, which is our second question. Second question is to fix the data issues, right? Fix the data issues in start time. After that is done, we can create a summarize for this. Okay, let's check the start time. So if you see, the start time is not in standard format, that's why the data issue is coming. So we need to convert all the dates which we are getting from the start date into a standard format. So for that, we can use our date time from the pass functions. Okay, let's use this date time. Now instead of passing our input directly, right, we can pass it from here. So let's bring our input and connect to this date time. Let's select whatever we want the start time string to be converted into date time format. Just select our string. So this will be YYYMMDD along with hours, months, minutes and seconds. since this is going to generate a different column for us, you have to use the select statement to unselect the previous date. Okay, so let's unselect this previous date, and this new date which we have, let's rename it as start date. Sorry, start time. And now let's pass in this input to that formula tool. Let's check out whether our issue is fixed. Weekday, weekend, right? We got weekend, weekday. So, okay, so our issue is resolved. Now, the first question was to analyze the weekday, weekend trend, right? For that, we can bring in our summarize tool. Let's bring that. And we'll connect it from our formula tool and summarize it based on the column which we have. So first we can have the group by based on the day type. Okay, let's group it by. To get the number of accident, we'll use the ID column and let's count distinct for this. Okay, and let's begin our browse to see the output as well. The dataset, if you see, is very big. That's why the processing time is little more. Okay, so we get our weekday and a weekend, and we can see from here the number of accidents in weekday is much higher than on weekend. Let's move on to our third question, which is to analyze the hourly accident trend. As we know in our data, we don't even have an hour, right? So we'll again have to use our start time to extract the hours from here. Let's go to a formula tool. We can use the same formula tool to create the hours column. Okay. Let me put it hour. For that, again, we can use a date time format. Let's pass in our start date time. And since it is hours, we'll have to use capital H. Okay, open the quotes. Let's give a percentage symbol, capital H. Okay, so this is done. Next thing which we can do is let's bring in one more summarize tool. Let's pass on our formula to this. This time, let's put hours to our group by. And for the ID, again, same thing we'll have to do. We'll count the distinct for accidents. Bring in our browse tool, but this is not sorted. Okay, so let's bring in our sort tool as well so that we can see the trend. Let's sort it based on our hours. Sorry. Or even we can sort it based on the accident as well. Let's do it the descending order. So now we get all the hours, okay, from 12 to all. We notice from 5 p.m. that's in the afternoon time the accident has been much higher, and during midnight from 12 to 3 the accident has been the lower end. Okay, so this is the trend we notice. Now let's move on to our fourth question, which is to display the accident at the end of a month. For that, we will again have to use a formula tool. Okay, let's create end of the month column. For this, we will have to use our date time trim function, which takes in a date and a format. So In this, we'll again pass in our start time, followed by, here we have a function called as last of month. Okay, this is done. This. And let's try to check this. So there is some error, it didn't pick up. Month spending is wrong here. Okay, so now you see the value is coming. Let's run it again. Let's check our results now. So this is 29th of Feb because we had Feb month. Let's check out some other. This is 31st of December. Okay, so this is the December month. So our value is coming correct. Let's move on to our next question. So this fifth question is to display the asset at the end of previous month. Okay, let's try that out. For that again, let's use the same formula. I mean the formula tool, and where we can add a new column called end of the previous month. Let me copy this because it will be similar. In the previous month. So here instead of last, one thing we can try out, okay, so is to add the month to this, right, which is in the increment of -1. Let's try that. Date, time, add. We'll have the date here. We want previous month, so it says -1. And see, if we give it this way, right, months. Let's try this. This will actually give us a wrong output for the month of Feb. Since Feb is of 29 days, right? The last month it will take for the January will be 29. So since it is Feb, right? So if you see, instead of getting as 31st of Jan, it has taken 29th of Jan. So this approach is not correct. Let's try to rectify this. In that case, we'll have to replace our last of month to another function which is first of the month. Okay. And in this, instead of passing month, we'll pass in the days. Let me make it first of the month. First, and instead of -1 month, we'll make it days. So this is again the Feb output. We should be getting 31st of Jan as the end of the month. Okay, so this is correct now. Moving on to the last question, which is based on macros. We need to accept user input for the start time range and display the action for that date range only. Okay. So for this purpose, we'll have to create a macro. Let's try creating a macro. So as we have discussed in the previous videos, the macro should first have a macro input. So the interface tool, let's bring in the macro input. We'll have to give a sample data. So for this, I can keep this as select, maybe user input. And since it's going to be a date range, now let's give a date for this. So let me give today's date, which is 01/23. Okay. After this, we have seen we have to use a filter, right? So to filter out the values at each iteration. So in this case, again, let's have our user input, which is equal to the value which we have given. We have to give the same value here so that it will filter it out. 2023-01 followed by 23. We need a range, so we need a start date and this start end time. Okay, for the start time itself, we need the two ranges, beginning and end. So this is, we'll again have to duplicate this filter. So in this filter, first filter, we can give less than equal to the starting date, and this should be, sorry, this should be greater than equal to, and this should be again less than, and we'll pass in this true to this. We cannot bring in from same input. Okay, we need these to be interconnected. That's the range should be interconnected from start to end, right? You cannot start the beginning from anywhere else. So this will connect these two to give the user the interactivity to select the dates. We again go to our interface tool and we need to bring this date. Let's give it as select start date, and I can again bring in one more for the end date, which will be start select end date. Now we need to update the values, right? For that function part, as we have seen previously, we'll have to connect this to our lightning symbol. Let's connect it, we'll get the update option. We got the update, okay? So in previous videos, we have seen how to update the value. Here also we can try updating the values, but let me show you a different one, which is to update the value with formula. This is the one which we are getting in our formula. And let's try to replace it with the start time which we will be having. For that, so user input is a string. User underscore input. This should be greater than equal to. Again, we have to give this inside bracket, right? So this will be our first string. We need to append this with our date which we are giving. Okay, so give select date. Again, we need to append this with the final one, which is, okay, so this is our first string. This is our value which we are going to replace as variable value, and this is again our second string. Click on OK, and let me just copy the same thing for the other one as well. Let's create an action for this. Yeah, instead of having greater than, let's have less than. And finally, this is done. So now our task is to have a micro output. Let's bring in our output tool here. Okay. So as we know, for running a macro, we need to save it and bring it to a workflow. Let's just save this. Let's go back to our data. Here, since we need to give a date range for the accident, right? Let's try to bring in our macro to the new workflow. We need to give an um, input to it, which is select, which is a start time, right? So we can pass it to our select here, and let's start the select time. But if we again check this, right, this will, since this macro has only one input, right, we again need the accident data as well. For that, we'll have to get it from our formulas. Let's use a join tool for that to join the values. I'll join this macro input with the input which we're getting from formulas to get the accident basically. So at the right side, this side we should have our start time, and the right side should have the user input. Now let's try to browse this. Use this select, and instead of passing everything, right, let me just pass in our start time for this. Okay, sorry, I haven't selected the date here, right? For that, we'll again have to go here. Let's try something 2020. Let's try October 2000, 1st October till October 3rd. Let's start a run for this range. So we're getting 13,000 for first, second, first. We're getting only the user inputs which we are giving, right? So we can bring in a summarize tool now to see the summarized value. We can have our start time added to group by. Start and user input to the group by, and okay, we are not getting this part properly here. This is because of the join issue, okay? Now I think I will get this. Okay, yeah. Count the accident numbers and bring in a browse tool. So we are getting the output for 1st and 2nd October 2020. Okay. So we have got a final output, and thank you for watching.